we got Rambo Last Blood coming out here real soon. And I figured since it's his last blood, I should probably go back and watch, First Blood, seeing as I've never seen them before. So I'm the newbie to the Rambo franchise, but stick with me. I got a veteran to the Rambo franchise coming right up. Welcome to Durbania. I'm Durbin, and this is my retro review for Rambo First Blood. Now, like I said, I'm the newbie to this franchise. I thought I saw them when I was a kid, but really, I just kind of had, random ideas, like his giant knife stuck in my head, because, when you're a kid, that's the coolest thing. But apparently, I had never really truly seen these movies, so I went through to watch them for the first time and decided to bring on somebody who is a Rambo fan. So you'll get his perspective as the fan and my perspective as the newbie. So joining me from the silver screen analysis is Anthony Digioia. What is up, Anthony?
What's up, Durbin? First and foremost, I'm excited to finally make my first appearance on Durbania.
Yeah.
Talking about Rambo, like you said, I am the veteran. I'm an 80s kid. I'm a 90s teenager, so these movies are definitely a part of my childhood and a part of my adult life as well. I'm excited to talk about it, and I cannot wait for Last Blood.
Yes, I'm actually pretty darn excited for Last Blood too, now that I binged all 4 of these movies back to back. So now that they're kind of meshed all together as one big thing in my head, you might have to help me keep them separated as we go through this. But let's just talk you. So what is your Rambo First Blood first experience?
My first experience for Rambo First Blood was actually after Rambo First Blood Part 2. This one came out in the early 80s, so I was still kind of young for it, and I saw it as a kid, and honestly, it was completely different than I was expecting. After seeing Rambo 2 and just the excess that it had, this one was much more kind of like a character study of post-traumatic stress disorder. It wasn't as flashy, but it was still just very gritty, and I don't think I really appreciated it as much. There wasn't as much explosions, and there wasn't as much just Rambo moments that you would kind of consider being just iconic for the series. But then as I got a little bit older, I watched it again, and then after I watched it just maybe in my late teens, it really connected with me, and I think it just really stands as one of its own films inside this franchise.
Oh yeah, and it's funny because, like I said, I guess the vague memories I have of the Rambo franchise when I was a kid, because I was born the year before First Blood came out. No, the year after First Blood came out. I'm bad at math. And so, I didn't really grow up watching these movies, but apparently somewhere in my childhood, I saw bits and pieces of the second and third one. So I had this whole idea in my head what First Blood was going to be. And then, like you said, I'm watching it, and yes, it has a lot of fantastic action. It does have some pretty good explosions, but it wasn't about that. And so it was interesting diving into this because it kind of broke what I thought Rambo was. It kind of broke that mold. And there was a part of me that at first was starting to feel a little disappointed because I was like, give me straight up action, come on! But then as it was doing this character study, and it was kind of showing the, police abusing their power and exploring Rambo and his post-traumatic stress, and not only his post-traumatic stress and the horrors that he faced in Vietnam, but the horrors he faced coming home because of how the Vietnam vets were treated. It ended up taking this character and making me respect him so much more. I mean, what did you think of that?
Completely agree. I mean, the film opens up and it's a completely different Rambo than we know from any other moment in the franchise. He's not melodramatic like he is in the later movies. He's almost like a wide-eyed kid coming home from war thinking that this life back home is going to be completely different, and then he finds out that, one of his friends has killed himself or was killed. I forgot exactly how that was, but then
I believe it was Agent Orange and he died.
That's right, absolutely. Yeah, so it's like it immediately starts that downward spiral to where it's just like, okay, it just starts to wear on him more and more and more, and then eventually, once he starts getting harassed by these deputies, and then he's inside the sheriff's station and basically about to get his shaving, and it kind of just reactivates that soldier inside of him, and from there he's just kind of like a completely different character. He's almost jaded by the world that he's been brought back to. It wasn't what he really expected, and it really allowed Stallone to kind of bring his most he's definitely theatrical in all the other movies, but I think this was his most emotionally grounded performance in as the character, and I think he was able to show that throughout.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. It's interesting that this is the first outing of Rambo. And I was actually talking to my dad about this yesterday, because apparently he'd seen all these movies, and he's like, yeah, I don't like the sequels, but that first movie impacted me. And, you know, my dad's older brother was a Vietnam vet, my father-in-law was a Vietnam vet, and so it's kind of like, I'm listening to these stories that Rambo, like, especially at the end, where he is, I mean, crying like a baby at the end, and he's talking about how he's trying to literally put his friend back together.
My friend, it's all over me. He's got blood and everything, and I'm trying to hold him together.
Oh my gosh. And so, like, the way this movie builds up, and I was listening to, like, Cody Leach talk about this, and I agreed with him, that it's not about building up to an action-packed climax, it's about building up to this emotional climax, which is very different for an action film in the 80s, and when you think about it, that's a pretty big risk that they took, not building it up to how big of an action sequence can we do here at the end, but to really kind of just show, hey, our military made sacrifices. They need to be honored and not, you know, thrown away or cast aside, and kind of just showing the pain that he was going through. And I thought, what? This was not what I was expecting out of a Sylvester Stallone 80s action Rambo film, but I enjoyed it. It was a really interesting look at things. And I kept going back and forth, which was kind of interesting because at first, the fact that that stupid sheriff was such a jerk because his ego was so flippin' big that he couldn't even he didn't even get to know Rambo. He just wouldn't even let the guy stay in the town and get a bowl of soup.
Is there any law against me getting something here?
Yeah, me.
And because he kept pushing, he was triggering Rambo. And like you said, when they were going to shave him and he freaked out, it's like on the one hand, they were abusing their power, they were abusing him, and when he beat the ever-living tar out of them, I was like, yeah, you all deserved it. And the fact that they arrested him over something so bogus, it's just like, poor Rambo. But then as it escalates, and Rambo's behavior escalates, I was like, oh, this guy needs some mental help.
Yeah, actually, yeah, I completely agree with you, because I think throughout that entire scene in the cave, it slowly is that build-up. I mean, I think this movie was ahead of its time because it was kind of diving into more than just what an action movie dives into. It can really overlap into like almost like biographical situations to where soldiers have to experience things when they come back and it's not exactly what they thought, and then just not really diving into the mental torment that these people have when they come back, and not really diving into just the medical symptoms of it. And you get Troutman in there, who's kind of serving as the exposition throughout the film to kind of build up who this guy was and all his capability was. And I thought it was just perfect that their first scene together in the movie is when Rambo has his breakdown moment, and it just made their coming together so much more. It made, I mean, he's on the defensive the entire time. He really, after the sheriff's station, he's really just fleeing. He's trying to just go out in the woods and be left alone. They're continuing to pursue him, and it just slowly advances through to where he's almost back in another war. And when you see him and Troutman together for the first time, and he's just diving through the issues that he's having, I think it makes it that much more impressionable.
Oh yeah, well, because it explains his behavior throughout the entire movie. I mean, it's interesting to see him in these woods, and I believe it's Oregon or Washington, but there he is in these woods, and he's created a whole nother war. Now, the action sequences are incredible. I mean, the fact that he set all these traps and took out these officers one by one without killing them to show you just how tough this guy is, like, all of that was just incredibly cool. At the same time, it goes that level deeper where it's more than that. He just fought in Vietnam, a war that we lost. He comes home to find, kind of, as he puts it in a later movie, a secret war going on right now. But now that he's in it, he's got to win it. And he tried to gracefully back out of that war. Like, after that one deputy was shooting at him when he's climbing down the rock wall, and in self-defense, he throws a rock at the helicopter. Helicopter turns, deputy falls to his death. He tried to surrender right there and put an end to this. But the other sheriff's ego had to go a step further, which continued to trigger Rambo.
Absolutely. Absolutely, and I think Brian Dennehy was just fantastic in that performance as well. He can really just make an unlikable character, and it's already unlikable on paper. He really had just an energy to it, to where you kind of understand at the end there, where Rambo's finally like, you know what, I'm had it. I'm gonna jump on the roof of this truck. I'm gonna come back, and I'm gonna wreak some havoc in this small town. And it's just like very unassuming, but it's just such a it's not grandiose and just filled with excess. I mean, just the camera work was great, just showcasing that fire in the background, and that's where we get to kind of see that first glimmer of, okay, he's completely like detached from coming back, and he's in his own little war in his head right now, and he's taking out breaker boxes and just shutting the power down. And it's really intense because you don't really know what's going to happen. I mean, this movie is like, if you were watching this movie before you know if any of the other Rambo movies are going to come out, you don't know if he's going to make it out. You don't know what's going to happen, and I think it just makes it so tense. And then even if you have seen the movie before, you remember the scene in his monologue later where he just breaks down, and it makes his actions just have that much more meaning to him.
Yeah, and what's so interesting about the scene where he's wreaking havoc on that little town, it's probably the scene where I started to feel the worst for him. Understanding the true mental torment and the post-traumatic stress that he is absolutely going through. At the same time, I'm going, oh my gosh, you're kind of a villain right now, dude. You gotta take a breath, and you gotta take a step back. But it was a powerful testament to the war that was going on within him, and the war that was going on in his own mind. And so I like the depth that First Blood had, and it really surprised me. Like, having not grown up with this series, having not watched it as a kid, really, to go into this as my first exposure to Rambo was quite a surprise.
Yeah, me too. And it's just, even like going back now and looking at the movie, I think it completely stands on its own. I think the character was completely different by the time the second film came around, but this film is like, you can go back, and if you want to watch Rambo and you want to watch something a little bit more intense, a little bit more grounded, and a little bit more gritty, you always have First Blood to go back to. If you want explosions and action movie tropes, you got all the other ones. But yeah, I think this movie really, I mean, even they didn't think it was going to be, I remember reading up for this film, and they said even Stallone didn't think this movie was going to be very successful, and it pretty much surprised everybody, because I think of like what you said earlier, other veterans can kind of relate to this story. Sure, it might be overinflated in certain areas, but it might not be. So that's where it's like it branches outside of the action movie to where it can pull a lot of different people in where they may not like the sequels.
Yeah. Well, it was overinflated, but to me, that was just trying to paint a picture. And I understood the picture it was trying to paint, and I was like, wow, it's a very powerful point and message that this was going to make. So, in conclusion, what would you give this film as a letter grade?
I would give this movie a definite A as a letter grade.
Awesome. I think I'm hovering between A-, B+. It's one of those movies that I enjoyed and it surprised me. I just don't feel like I have to go back to it and rewatch it right away. But it's definitely a very powerful movie that has a pretty darn good message.
Absolutely. And there's the practical effects, like you said, going throughout the forest locations with the natural lighting and just him taking people out. I mean, it really gives you first glimpses of what this guy's capable of. And even though all the technology is advanced to where we are today, it's still kind of fun to go back and see how it was done with just kind of a bare bones approach, that it can still create some great cinema.
All right, Anthony, well, tell us a little bit about your channel, where we can find you, and where we can find our Rambo First Blood Part 2 review.
Yeah, like you said, I'm Anthony with the Silver Screen Analysis. You can just find me on YouTube at the Silver Screen Analysis. You can find me on Twitter at Your Cinema Guy. I do a bunch of movie reviews. I've been doing a bunch of throwback reviews recently as well. I also have a Rambo video on my channel. It's a top 10 Rambo moments video that kind of just goes back through all the different movies. And yeah, definitely go back over there, check out the channel, and so we can do our Rambo 2 review.
That's right. So today, First Blood is here on my channel. Tomorrow, you can check out First Blood Part 2 on Anthony's channel, the Silver Screen Analysis. Wednesday, third movie here. Fourth movie gonna be over on his channel. So we're gonna have a fun time going back over these old Rambo movies, building up to Rambo Last Blood. Him as the dude who grew up with this, me as the newbie. So, what did you think of this review? Did you like it? Go over to Silver Screen Analysis, hit the subscribe button over there, hit the subscribe button right here, and hit the bell by the subscribe button so you're notified for the next time I drop a movie review, ranking video, theological analysis, trailer reaction, or anything else. I'm Durbin. This is Anthony. Thanks for checking out Durbania.